I couldn't do anything extra for them other than give them a job, and it was paycheck to paycheck. Been in the home service and the trades pretty much my adult life in one form or another, and we're growing, and I'd just like to try and get back to the community where.
What do you think was the biggest mindset shift you've experienced where you were like, I'm going to take over the United States? All right. Welcome to episode 2 of Expanding Local. Today I am with Billy Door Guy Cline. He is the founder of yournewdoor.com. He is a military veteran, served in the Army and National Guard, Army Reserves and National Guard, if I'm not mistaken. Billy, it's a pleasure to have you on. If you could give a quick introduction.
Hey, Will, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm a veteran. I don't talk about it a whole lot. I'm not a guy to run around, trying to get discounts and whatnot, but I'm proud to serve my country. Um, I am also a veteran of business. Been growing DFW Door Repair, which is now Your New Door, for about 15 years now. We rebranded about 18 months ago, so know a little bit about all that, but been in the home service and the trades pretty much my adult life in one form or another, and we're growing, and I'd just like to try and get back to the community where I can.
Well, and I just now figured out that you used to be, what was it, DFW Door Repair?
Yep.
I didn't know you did that, the rebrand so recently. What was the thought behind that?
So we had actually rebranded DFW Door Repair. It's always been DFW Door Repair, but back in 2022, I contacted Dan Antonelli, which a lot of people know in the home service space. He's very good at brands and whatnot. But he basically built us a new look, a new brand around our name, right? The problem for me was I wasn't thinking big enough, right? And at that time, I had no thoughts on going to other markets and all the things. I was under $1 million a year, so it was hard for me to fathom that we could go to, you know, anywhere we wanted in the United States. And so he built us a nice, lovely brand around DFW Door Repair. And then about a year after that, I bumped into a guy. I had arranged a meeting with him, a guy named Roy Williams. He's also a legend in the home service space. Some people may know him as the Wizard of Ads. He's the mastermind behind a marketing campaign for Gettle and a whole lot of really big, home service brands. So I had a meeting with him, and he convinced me that we had a scalable idea, a scalable model, and that we should rebrand to a name that we can travel to other towns with. And it was hard for me to come to grips with that because I just spent a whole bunch of money, building a new brand around DFW Door Repair. But we did, and it was the best thing we could have done. And we just couldn't figure out how to make DFW Door Repair searchable or work well in a place like Houston, right? So because DFW in Texas means Dallas Fort Worth, it doesn't mean David Frank Wayne or anything like that, right? So so we decided to go ahead and do it, but it was kind of slow, but things are really doing good now.
What do you think was the biggest mindset shift you've experienced over the last 15 years where you're like, this isn't just like a small company that, I'm going to have as a job for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to make this big and, delegate tasks, hire people, and expand and take over the United States?
Yeah, so it's been a progression, right? Even as my mindset has shifted over time, it's still growing, and I'm still, grasping bigger thoughts and bigger ideas and whatnot. But it started because just a little bit about me. I always have been a competitive guy. I did competitive bass fishing for 25 years, and I always thought that's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be that guy, and I was really good at it. I won a lot of money. But the problem with competitive bass fishing is it takes a lot of money to do it, and it takes a lot of time, right? So, 15 years ago when I won $5, $10, $15,000, it was a big deal, right? Like, it really made an impact financially. But as you go and as you grow and your time becomes worth more, $50,000 in a week off work is not an impact to what you lost, right? Being gone that long from your business. So it just was a something that I had to come to grips with, that I could either be great at business or great at fishing, but I couldn't be great at both at the same time. So I decided to do my best to become great at business, and then later I can go back and fish if I want, because I'll have money. Because I didn't see a path to where I was ever going to be rich from fishing or wealthy, right? So I went down that path. And so I say that to set the table for my mindset, right? I did that for 10 or 12 years, and it was number two or number three on my list of priorities, was just making sure I could get to the next fishing tournament, right? And that's what I worked for. And I kind of set my family and my business, fishing got chosen over those things a lot of times when it shouldn't have. So once I realized that I could either be great at one or the other, then I started to engage in the business more and realized that I didn't know shit. I don't know if I can say that on your podcast,
Yeah,
but
no, there's no filter here.
and so learning really begins when you realize you don't know anything, right? And it was like you may have heard me say this on some other podcasts, but it was like literally like going. There's a scene in The Wizard of Oz when the house drops on the Wicked Witch, and or the whatever the witch from the east or wherever she was. Anyway, and Dorothy puts the shoes on. It goes from black and white to color, right? And that's kind of how my life went. As soon as I realized that I didn't know anything and that I wanted to be more, it was like the world opened up, and I could see my blind spots. I could see what I didn't know. I could see people that were trying to help me, where before I was just, I could only see, what I wanted to do. And so I decided that I wanted to do more things. I wanted to do bigger things. We had a great business concept. I had great people, and I was making a good living. I would work 3 or 4 days a week and fish 3 or 4 days a week, right? Living the dream. But the problem was I couldn't help anyone else, right? Like the people that were working for me, I couldn't do anything extra for them other than give them a job, and it was paycheck to paycheck. So I wanted to build something. I heard Tommy say one time, a long time ago, um, build something big enough for your dreams, but big enough for the people who work with you, for their dreams to fit inside too, right? So I took that to heart, and I started trying to do things the right way, with growth, and I have no idea how big this thing's going to be. I've got some numbers written down, but I want to keep going and keep growing. This is, I love doing this. So every day I try and learn something that I didn't know, and it's actually really easy when you start reading books and listening to smarter people.
Heck yeah. And you were a super early adopter of the internet. What have you seen change on the like paid ad side of things, on the Google business profiles, all that stuff over the years? And how have you kind of adapted to that?
Well, by paying attention and getting around people who are already smarter than me at those things, right? And um, they're back in 2007 or 2008 when I kind of got started. I ran into this guy who was I met him on Craigslist, right? He had a little door company. He was selling and repairing doors, and he was looking for somebody to help him with doors. So I sent him a message, and what he was doing was he was generating leads, and he would just give me the lead, and I would go sell and do the job, and I would just give him a percentage of the job when I sold it. And he shared with me how he did it and all things. Back in the early 2000s, the internet was just kind of coming along. Yellow pages were still, the most prominent thing. So, but he was doing PPC on Google, and he kind of showed me a little bit, and I bought a couple books and read about it and built my first little website, and wrote all my ads and all the things. I still, to this day, have my original Google account. It's 12 or 15 years old now, and it performs well. But I did my own PPC for all those years, right? Up until last year, I started letting some other people mess with it, or the year before last. But I would say I was an early adopter. Back when I started, a click was a quarter, and now for what we do, they're still relatively cheap, but they're, 15, 20, $25 depending on the click, 30 some of them. But we started building a brand to kind of start getting away from the rental space on Google, right? And we started setting up multiple GMBs, right? Renting offices. In 2023, we were spending 35,000 a month on PPC. So I was starting to learn about the multiple GMB strategy, right? Where you rent an office somewhere, get a real office, and you get it verified by Google, get reviews to it, and all things. So I thought, well, why don't I start taking, 1,000 or two a month from this 35,000 we're spending, and lease these offices and start building these GMBs. And now we have 5 of them, and we're going to try and bring 2 more online this year.
Man, good for you.
And
You were ahead of that.
yeah, we just send all of our reviews to one at a time until we get 30, 40, 50 reviews, and then we gate the reviews to the next one until we get them, up and running good, and then we just send whatever review in that region to the right GMB. But it's kind of a long game, right? And I told my people when we started it that we're just planting seeds, right? And it's going to take a while for these seeds to sprout. We're going to have to water them and they're going to have to grow. But I said, in 2, 3, 5 years, these are going to be like fruit trees. They're just going to be evergreen and they're always going to be bearing fruit. And there's nothing other than if Google shuts us down for some reason that no one can catch up with us, right? So we shifted away from PPC and started siphoning some of that money to the GMBs, and it made a huge impact. And another thing we did was we started working with the Wizard of Ads on radio, and basically we took the money we spent on PPC in 2023, and we spent it on radio in 2024, and it's done wonders for our brand, right? It's most of the radio stuff we do is not direct response, but more of a branding play. So when people start to need us or have a door problem, they look us up by name, which is yournewdoor.com, right? So, and you can track that in your search console by your branded searches, right? You can see what people are looking up, and branded searches obviously have, 70, 80, 90% click-through rate, while door repair near me may have 2 or 3%, click-through rate. So, it's been fun to kind of watch that go and grow, but just, there's a lot of people that say this. I've heard it for a long time. Tommy says it all the time, but success leaves clues, right? So just kind of paying attention to what these other gurus and other super successful people are doing and saying it's working for them, and then digging in and learning about it and reading a book or talking to someone smarter than me about it kind of points us in the right direction. And then we get the right people to help us implement. So, and implementation is a big thing too. We all go to these shows and events and hear people talk about all these great ideas, and we get all fired up and then go home and get stuck back into what we're doing and kind of failure to launch type thing, and we don't implement. So I've always been an amazing implementer, and it's one of the things that's helped us grow as fast as we have.
So I have a bunch of clients with like their main office is a Google Business Profile, and it's maybe outside of like a major city. Then they'll set up a virtual office in the like big city in their market, and the office that is like quote unquote fake gets like all the business. Like they're showing up on the LSAs, they're showing up on the Google Business Profile, organic. What have you learned? I think you mentioned you have 5 different offices. What have you learned about the importance of location on those, whether it's a virtual office or just like a rented office space?
Yeah, so we've actually had very poor luck with virtual office space, and having, getting them approved. So we bailed on those altogether, and also on service area business pages, right? So I look for, and just to kind of back up a little bit, I look for offices that are useless for anything else, right? Like a 600 square foot office that's tucked way back in a shopping center or upstairs or something that's been sitting for a long time and that no one wants, because I can get it for relatively cheap. But it has to be in a good area, right? It doesn't do me any good to put one in an area where we don't want to be in, or where the tickets are too small, or there's not a lot of my avatar living there. So we look for areas, we're on Service Titan and have been for 3 or 4 years now. So we have all the data on our top 10 best areas where we want to be in. So those are generally the areas where you would want to put a physical location, office, or GMB page where you're already getting good jobs. Like we replace doors, right? So the ideal house is older than 15 or 20 years old in an area where the household income is a little bit higher. The houses are a little bit bigger, things like that. So those are really the kind of areas you want to be in. You don't want to put one, or your main one shouldn't be in an industrial area where there's not a lot going on, around the river or something, so the closer it is to the place where you want to work, the more it's going to get the people you want to work for, right? So that's one thing. And then just making sure that you do all the things that Google requires. They don't. I mean, they have all the rules and all the lists, but if they can't get it approved, they don't tell you why. You got to go through step by step and figure it out. So, but the main thing is just putting it in an area where you want to work. We've had really good luck with a 5, 6, 7, 8 mile radius. So.
What's your process for finding those like hidden offices? Like, are you calling different businesses? Are you going to these places or?
Yeah, so I'm always paying attention, and there's a couple things. I use LoopNet some. I've got a few, hacks that I use, one for hiring and other things, but LoopNet is pretty good. And, and just look in areas or zip codes that you want to be in, right? And then filter it by square footage of the space, and then also filter it. A lot of them on LoopNet don't have the price per square foot of the space, but generally a 400, 500, 600 square foot space is going to be $1,000 a month or less, right? So I look for that in areas that I want to be in, and then we've gotten a little bit better at it now because we've done it, a handful of times. But identifying of space where we're not going to have overlap with where we already have one, where they're kind of relatively close, and looking in those areas, is a big key.
You talked about radio ads and how they kind of drive brand recognition and direct searches for your business. What have you learned about radio? Because I feel like radio, you can either like throw money in a fire pit or you can actually succeed at like making people recognize your brand. What are kind of like the keys to winning in radio?
Well, I, like a lot of people, thought radio was dead, right? Like, people still listen to the radio. I don't listen to the radio. I haven't really listened to the radio until I started advertising on the radio. I haven't listened to the radio in 5 years, right? I listen to podcasts. I listen to books, things like that. A little bit of satellite radio, on the news or something, or sports. But for the most part, I listen to podcasts and books. And but there's a large piece of the population that does still listen to radio. And my suggestion, though, is not to go in blind, right, and call up the radio station or work directly with someone, that sells radio spots or mass media. They call it TV and radio. Work with someone who is the liaison between you and the radio company, because they know how to buy the spots. The radio will sell you ROS, or run of schedule, right? So, it doesn't do you any good to be on the radio at 2 a.m., right? They'll get you in the right time slots. Working with someone, you need to have a message and a strategy before you get started. And in a strategy, meaning you're either going to be a call to action or what they call it, direct response marketing or branding, right? We chose to do branding because we want to build a brand. We want to build a relationship. We want people to get invested in our story. So we basically tell a story over time and about our brand and who we are and how we're going to impact our customers' lives in a positive way. And, you hear a lot of ads for windows and doors and stuff or whatever, and they talk about call today to save 30% or whatever, right? So it's two different strategies that both work. One of them, you build a brand, you build a name, and you can charge more. The other one, you're just trying to get your foot in the door and charge as little as possible and get your margins, So we chose the the previous, where we're just building a brand. So having someone to help negotiate those rates, having someone to help negotiate the schedule, and then having someone that can guide you in the messaging is super important. And we work with Wizard of Ads for all that. We went straight to the bone, and that they know what works, right? So we're not having to do trial and error or test messaging or whatever. We just start from jump, and it starts to work. It does take a while for it to load up. There's a lot of psychology and science around how many times the message has to be heard in a 7-day period and all these things. And Roy Williams is the GOAT at that. Him and Ryan Shute. There's several of them that work with Roy, but they're all super smart. They know all the data, and they just go right to where it works. You're not having to nibble around the edges or anything. So having someone that can help you with the messaging, with the story arc, and with buying the ads and getting on the right stations is really doesn't do any good to get on a radio station playing whatever. If
Katy Perry.
If you're you need to be talking to homeowners if you're doing home service, right? So you don't want to be on kids radio, right, or something like that. So oldies and classic rock and country music, things like that. People still listen to that. Talk radio, people still listen to that stuff. And so hire someone that can get you pointed in the right direction on that. Of course, I'm partial to Wizard of Ads, but there's a lot of companies out there that do it.
So when it comes to radio, one of the things that I'm curious about is tracking. How much can you track, and what are you currently tracking when it comes to your stuff for Your New Door?
You can't. I say you can't. You kind of can, right? What radio does, or mass media, is it's not impossible to have your finger on the pulse, but it's almost impossible to track it very good. If you're doing a direct response, it's a little bit easier because you would use a specific phone number that only is used for that, But what you see, and we were an interesting case study because, as far as I know, no one else has really ever done this before or tracked it like this. But in your search console, of course, you can see, branded searches. When we launched Your New Door, we decided to keep DFW Door Repair active as well, instead of doing a redirect and combining, all that traffic, which was a very fortuitous event, right? Because had we, I think, redirected DFW Door Repair to Your New Door, we probably would have went out of business. Even today, DFW Door Repair still generates 50% of our revenue a year and a half later. Yeah, but there was a couple of fortuitous things that worked there, right? So one, we were the only branded marketing or paid marketing we were doing for Your New Door, and still to this day, has been radio. So any branded searches in the search console have to be coming from radio, right? Have to be. That's the only place. We're not doing. We haven't done any direct mail. We've done a little bit of some magazine stuff, but it's all, $350,000 last year spent on radio only, and that was it. No PPC, nothing. So when someone types in yournewdoor.com or yournewdoor.com or Your New Door, they had to have heard it on the radio. So we were able to track that because it wasn't diluted or polluted with any other marketing efforts. So that was interesting. And then the fact that we kept our old brand, right, and still use it, really gave us a lot of good data too, because I was able to, we've got tracking numbers on DFW Door Repair and on DFW Door Repair GMB and things like that. So we were able to kind of see where the calls were coming from in our CRM. And it's taken quite a while for Your New Door to catch up with web traffic, with click-through rate, things like that, to DFW Door Repair. It finally has. It's actually passed it, but in traffic. But DFW Door Repair has, I'm going to say this. I think I should start 3 or 4 more brands in the same market, because when you Google something, um, relatively high intent keywords, but nothing specific, like you're not Googling me directly, right? Like new front door, Plano, Texas, right? I got like 4 spots above the fold on Google between LSA, GMBs for both brands in the map pack, and organic, right? Like we've got tons of free organic listings coming up. So when you got 4 or 5 or 6 spots between both brands above the fold on the first page of Google, it's hard to
Yeah.
lose. So
Yeah.
it was, like I said, I say that to say it was fortuitous that we didn't kill the DFW brand, because it's catching all those spots on Google, and you can't you can't quantify what that's worth, because it costs a lot to get to that point where you're coming up like that. So I say all that to say I've often thought maybe I should start another brand or two.
I'm curious with the rebrand because I've had a client going through this. How do you handle the assets, like the Google business profiles, the website? Like you keep them separate, like, and then build the new one completely separately. How do you handle that transition with regards to all the assets?
Yeah, so I've always, and you see me post a lot online, I'm always a proponent for owning your digital assets, own your digital footprint. Don't let your marketing company lock you out, right? You need to be the administrator on all of your accounts and giving your marketing companies access, right? You can make them administrators too, but just don't make it to where they can change your passwords or anything. You have to own all that. If you don't, it's like I liken it to a lot of people are into crypto now, right? And they say if you don't own your keys, you don't own your crypto. If you keep all your money on Robinhood or Coinbase, um, then they can cut off your access to it, right? But if you have it on a cold storage wallet, a USB wallet, or whatever, then you own it, right? So having access and having all your your passwords where people can't lock you out or hold you hostage, or if you want to move to another company, there's a really big home service marketing company in the U.S. that do big things. They're partners with Service Titan, but I can't tell you. I've got friends that work there, but I don't agree with them, holding URLs and domains hostage when they want to move to a new company.
I think I know who you're talking about.
You probably do.
I think I just dealt with them last week, actually. So
Yeah. So I say that to say I've always kind of led my own marketing out of ignorance for a long time. Um, I've got PTSD like a lot of home service and business owners do from marketing companies and from Google. I can't tell you how many times I woke up, back in the day and saw that Google had taken all the money out of my account, right? Because I implemented something that they said or whatever on PPC, and it was just a nightmare. And once it crosses the line to Google, it doesn't come back, right? Like it's a mess. So I say that to say I've always been very cautious and untrusting on digital marketing companies. I've worked with several that were, just bad. And I, in 2023, hired a sales guy who turned out to be he had his own little digital marketing company, but he wanted to get into sales, so he was doing sales. Well, when we were going through all this transition and rebrand, he's like, "Hey, Billy, I can help with all this digital stuff. And I'm like, "All right." So I let him do all that. It turned out this guy was phenomenal, right? Like he built our current website, the bones of it. All the service area pages. We probably got 1,500 service area pages on our website.
wow,
Um,
good for
all
you.
all the things, for all the services for each zip code we wanted to be in and all that. So he's super smart. Well, he came to me middle of last year and he had another opportunity and he was going to move on. So I was kind of stuck. I'm like, well, do I want to hire someone else that kind of understands and is wants to be a part of the philosophy, with the service area pages and all things, because there's a lot of different styles when it comes to SEO, right? Or do I want to work with a company? So I decided that we wanted to work with my friend Jonathan Bannister. And Jonathan and I had been friends for a while. He actually started working out with me when I decided that I wanted to get into shape and lose weight. And I drove 45 minutes each way to over by where he lives to work out with him for 4 or 5 months. He never once pitched me. We didn't really talk about stuff like that. And so that meant a lot to me whenever I was starting to look. And when I did finally make the commitment and started working with this team, it was like, they're amazing, right? Like just the accountability, the transparency, the ideas, all the things. But I gave them access to my things, right? Like they're the administrators on all the accounts, and I trust them, but I still own the keys, right? So all that said, right? Like everything is on our platforms in Google and our ads accounts and LSAs and all the things, but we just share access with them. So it's not that hard to keep it all separated and all things. And then Search Console, of course, is super important. If you're a business owner and you don't have access to your Search Console to kind of follow along, they say that most of the data on there is what do they call it? Doesn't mean a lot, right? Like it's anecdotal. But I tell you what, when I can watch my Search Console and searches, for over the past 18 months, and the times when it was up is times, when the phone was blowing up, and the times when it was down was when it was. I can show you month by month. I can show you specific dates when there were search or Google algorithm updates, right? Like that's the date right there. I can see it on the thing when our traffic went down, and I can also show you that's the date when calls quit coming in. So vanity metrics they call it. But just having access to that and having a level of understanding, you don't have to understand how to do PPC or any of the things, but you need to understand how it works and if someone's blowing smoke up your tailpipe, because a lot of people will,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of metrics that they want to share with you that don't mean anything,
How many clicks?
Yeah. So
you've been super proactive. You seem like a really smart dude, and you kind of figured your way around these different like Google Ads, Google Business Profile. A lot of companies haven't, and like I don't know if they don't want to, or maybe it's just too like complicated for them, too scary. If they are being held hostage by an agency, which obviously like you haven't had to experience that. If they're past the point where like this agency has control over everything, and then they call them up and say, "Hey, I'm not seeing results. I want to cancel the retainer." The agency says, "Nope, sorry. Like you can cancel, but you're going to have to pay us for the rest of the contract, and then we're going to keep all your assets because it's proprietary software." What would you recommend that they do? Because I feel like there's a lot of options, but they don't really realize that they have options. What would you kind of recommend someone in that situation to do?
I'm going to kind of say this from an anecdotal position, right? Most of the companies that get stuck in those positions are most likely relatively small. And when I say relatively small, they're probably under $2 million a year, right? A lot of contractors can get to $1 million without being too sophisticated, by trusting a lot of people, by knocking on doors, by posting in Facebook groups and all the things, right? It happened to me, without a terribly sophisticated marketing plan or anything. But what happens is you have to continue. There comes a point where you get into debt and you start buying equipment and doing other things. So you have to stay on that hamster wheel. You have to generate new leads. You have to generate new sales to grow your company. Because now what happens is we think this is going to continue to perpetually just grow organically. And to a certain point it will. But marketing is where people get stuck, right? And there's really only two KPIs that matter when it comes to growing your business: your customer acquisition costs and your gross profit, right? If your gross profit is too low and you've got overhead, you can forget everything else, right? Like you've got to have a gross profit to sustain the business. And your customer acquisition costs will tell you, where you're at. If your average ticket is $2,000, but your customer acquisition cost is $400, you're upside down. It's costing you 20% to gain a customer, unless you're coming into a new market and spending a lot of money just to get market share, and you'll turn it back later. That's not good, right? So those are the two things that matter. And the marketing is where your customer acquisition costs get sky high, right? You start to do a lot of PPC, whatever it is, direct mail, you've got a wrong message. That's when you need to start leaning on marketing professionals. And then you trust everybody you talk to, they've got results for someone else. But a lot of times, for every 5 people that are getting good results, you got 3 or 4 behind the scenes that don't. And a lot of times, those 3 or 4 that don't is because they're not implementing properly on their side, right? A lot of people can, I can generate leads for anybody, but if they're not answering the phone when those people call and they're not jumping on that lead and treating that customer like they're the only thing in the world that means anything to them at that time, those people, you're not going to get any sales, and you're going to spend a lot of money on marketing and lose a lot of leads that are just falling right out the door. And that's the number one problem, I would say, with a lot of home service companies and businesses in general that rely on inbound demand type leads, is they get the calls but they don't call them back, or whatever, for whatever reason. So that's one thing. And then another is, you're going to have to edit this. I just hit a wall.
No worries. One of the things I also wanted to talk about is, like, you mentioned, like, magazines, direct mail. Like, it sounds like you're kind of hitting everything. And like, my expertise is only really in like Google ads, Google local services ads. Like, I would like to start helping my clients with direct mail, but I'm not going to even try to consider myself an expert in any of those topics because I've never experienced it. Like, what is your experience kind of breaking into other, maybe quote unquote alternative advertising mediums, platforms like direct mail, magazines, things like that?
So we really are only spending enough to kind of test messaging, right? And right now we get enough inbound demand and organic leads to grow the company. We grew the company, I don't know, almost 50% year over year last year.
Good
Was
for you.
only spending on radio, no direct mail, no PPC, a
Wow.
little bit of LSA, stuff like that, and then of course our GMBs, but no direct response marketing. We did spend a little bit on some postcard direct mail stuff around houses where we're already working and neighborhoods we wanted to be in, just tested messaging. And then the same thing with some like home mags, in the affluent areas where we wanted to be, testing messaging and whatnot. And you really got, it's a numbers game, right? So for direct mail, if you send out, you need to send out, in my opinion, at least 5 to 10,000 pieces at a time, and maybe even stagger that. But for 10,000 pieces, you might get 200 or 300 calls, right? So 1, 2, 3% response rate, and then your close rate on top of that. So let's just say you got a 2% response rate on 10,000 pieces. That's 200 calls. And if your close rate is 40, you're only going to close 80 of those 200, right? So you spent probably $15,000 on 10,000 pieces to get 40 jobs. So what is your average ticket, right? So if your average ticket is $500, right, you just spent 15,000 to make 20. But if your average ticket is $4,000, then you just spent 15,000 to make whatever 300,000, right? So or 120, which is not that bad. So you got to kind of look at all that. And so we dabble right now with direct mail. We know that organic isn't going to carry us forever, and you got to be careful about most of your leads coming, especially from Google, because it doesn't take much for Google to do something, even if they're not being malicious, right? Like just an algorithm update or something, and people can't find you on Google, or they suspend your GMB. I see a lot of posts that people need help getting their GMBs unlocked because that's their number one generator of leads. And so we're doing a lot of research and on messaging and things that are working on us, so we can start putting a lot more money in these other things to keep us going if one thing goes down. But kind of to your question was, adding these services into what you already do. And marketing is a multi-disciplined affair, right? If you got a guy that's really good at SEO, he's probably not any good at PPC. He doesn't know a thing about direct mail, right? Or mass media. So what I've learned is, and most reputable marketing companies are fine with this, digital marketing companies, is sometimes you got to work with multiple contractors for that, right? Like with Jonathan and Cornerstone, they help us with our SEO, PPC, but we have someone else that we work with on our strategy for direct mail that we're putting together, and obviously for radio and all things. So you got to put together a team. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to go with Cornerstone instead of hiring someone else in-house, because usually if you got someone in-house, they're really good at one thing, but they're not great in multidiscipline marketing, right? So hire a team or work with someone that and even like you, right? Like you've got a relatively small footprint, but you can network with someone that's great at PPC, right? Or great at direct mail, and put those guys in your network, and you guys all share, leads, and help people that way. So I say that to say it's really hard to find a well-rounded marketing company that handles all that. And if you do, it's probably going to be pretty expensive,
Yeah.
So
I'd say any agency that says they can handle like all aspects is either lying or they're a unicorn.
yeah, I'm not saying there's not one out there, but they're going to be really busy. They're going to be scaling really fast if they're any good, and that's kind of a double-edged sword too when you're growing really fast, because like Service Titan, I don't know if you're familiar with Service Titan.
But yeah,
I'm sure a lot of the people that listen to this are. Service Titan's a good example of this. Amazing product, right? Amazing concept. I'm sure they got really good people that work there. I know a lot of the people that work there that are amazing people, but they don't have the customer support that they should for what they charge, right?
yeah,
You shouldn't have to hire a third party to help you implement it, because the people that Service Titan, their implementers, don't know what they're doing, right? I'm making blanket statements. I love Service Titan. I couldn't run my business without it. However, it's one of those things to where they grew too fast. They got a lot of people there that don't know. They're trying to help people by committee. So if you get a CSM and you talk to them like, hey, I'm having this problem, they're like, well, let me send an email and talk to 3 other people in my group and someone will get back to you. Bro. So it happens to marketing companies too. They have some success. They grow too fast. They can't keep enough people. They're hiring warm bodies a lot of times that aren't as experienced in their lane and in their discipline, and things kind of start to fall off. They don't have enough oversight or managers, and it happens. But it's kind of the backside of that sword that a lot of people, the companies that scale really fast, get into, and it's just part of it. So it's tough.
that's what scares me right now is, and I feel like marketing agency land in particular, it is like plagued with companies that may or may not have good intentions, and then they grow too fast, try to scale too wide, cast a huge net, and then they just like blow up. Customers can't even reach like an account manager. That's why I'm like kind of terrified of like trying to grow at a very fast pace, and I want to make sure the foundation is set properly so that if we do start getting more clients or when we do start getting more clients, things don't just implode and like we're not labeled as scammers and kind of considered as the rest. How has that, I guess, going back to your new door, obviously you had to start delegating, you're growing pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
How did you start to like give trust to other people, whether it's employees or things of that nature? Like, how do you give ownership of the company to other people and let them handle work without going insane?
Well, the secret to growth and success in business is really boils down to 2 things. Can you provide value to the people that are buying your things, and your culture, right? So culture kind of is the chicken before the egg, right? Because you have to have a culture in your business to where you empower your people. Um, your you have two brands really: your brand that your people that hire you see, and the brand inside. Right, your brand is actually what people say about you when you're not present. Right, like I'm gonna go off in the weeds here. Do you like barbecue, or do you have a favorite restaurant that you tell everyone to go eat here?
Um,
Like, this is your favorite restaurant, you want to go here for birthdays or whatever?
I don't know. I don't really have like a go-to. I
Yeah,
don't really eat out
a
much,
lot
to
of
be
people
honest.
do, right? Like, if someone came to my house and we wanted to go somewhere, what just happened? Oh, there you go. My screen went blank for a second. Is it still recording?
Yeah.
And so, if you came to my house and we wanted to go to somewhere, I would take you to Marty B's. I'm like, you're gonna love Marty B's. This is a place. The food is great. The service is great. So that's their brand. That's their culture, though, right? And that's what you need to have in your business. So it starts with your culture. And I didn't know that. I ran my business for 10 or 15, 10 years, 12 years, 15, something like that. Before, like I said, I started to see in color. And what I saw was I wasn't even a very good boss, right? Like, we were struggling in a lot of ways. I was hiring warm bodies just to get stuff done. Things were getting messed up. People were mad, leaving bad reviews. I was just chasing money. But that's the thing, right? It's an energy, and people can smell it on you. Your customers, your employees, your team members, they can smell it when you're just chasing money, and you're not being, you're not of that brand, and you don't have the culture. So what I did was, when I realized that I was ready to become someone else, I was ready to become a leader, I was ready to grow this company and go all in. I had like 6 or 7, 8 people at the time, and I brought them all into my office, maybe 9. And I said, look, I'm sorry I haven't been the leader you guys deserve, the boss that you need, all the things that you would want in a person that you want to work for, or a company you want to work for. And I said, but starting today, actually before it was, I had already started, but starting today, there's a line in the sand, and I'm stepping across it, and I'm inviting you all to go with me. This was on a Friday. I said, you're going to start to see changes in me. You're going to start to see me grow. You're going to start to see me, physically change and sound different and look different and act different. And I said, I appreciate what you guys have done to get us to this point, but it's not going to get us to the next point. And I invite you all to take this journey with me. We're going to make 1% improvements every day until we get to where we want to go. And I said, I'm going to share my vision with you, and you guys are all going to be a part of this. If you want to go along with me, be here Monday. Everyone showed up on Monday. So I got their permission to make these changes. So that's you kind of have to do that when you want to make positive changes and do things in your business that are different than you've ever done. You got to get buy-in from and basically get their permission to do these things, or they're going to be confused and not know what's going on. And, oh, great, here comes Bill. He read another book, so we're going to change this or that. So the one thing that I promised them that would be consistent was change, right? Because we're going to grow this company to 20, 30, 40, 100 million. I don't know, but we're going to go as far as we can go. And I want to take everyone with me that wants to go. And this is what you can count on. So I got their permission. That allowed me to install the culture that I wanted to install. It wasn't that hard at, fewer than 10 people to do that. It's much harder. I can see it being much harder if you got 30 or 40 or 50 more people, and you've got a culture where people are calling out sick all the time, or you're getting bad reviews. They're just treating your customers, or just trying to get a check, all things. So that was one thing. And then the other was just being who I told them I was going to be, right? And being the person that I promised them that I was going to become. So they see me reading books. They see me doing all these things. And once you install that type of culture where you got an open door policy, you're empathetic, you're helping your people, you're helping them get to their dreams, you're giving them a pathway to success, showing them what the next level looks like for them, showing them what it looks like if they top out. You have them on performance pay to where if they work more and do more, they get paid more instead of getting paid by the hour, right? Giving them opportunities to do bigger things. Then you start to weed out the people that are just there for a paycheck. And we do all types of things. We have breakfast every Friday morning. We cook breakfast for the whole team. We have leadership book club where everyone, and I mean everyone in the company, from the guy that's just got there that's sweeping the floors to me, we all read a leadership book together and we digest it every week. And we do 2 or 3 of those books a year. And those types of things let your people know that you care about them, that you're investing in them, and that you want them to come along. And that is what the rest of the people in your company will feel, right? It starts to spread, right? Like a wave. And then they go out into the world and they treat your customers with that same respect, with that same smile on their face, with the same, they're not going to go out and cut a corner, or whatever. And then holding them accountable, setting a standard and holding your people accountable, right? That tells everyone else that just because this guy is generating the most sales or revenue, he's not getting away with something that no one else could, right? So setting a standard and having accountability. If you can do those things for your culture inside, your people will take care of what's going on outside the walls, right? So provide value and install a culture. And then once you have a culture installed, and you start to hire other people, it's pretty quick. You can tell pretty quick if they're going to, be one of us or not, right? And they'll either work themselves out and let themselves out, or they'll thrive, so.
I think one of the biggest paradigm shifts that I've ever heard in my life is from Tommy Mello. In this video, I heard him, I think he was just like speaking on a stage, and he was saying that these other garage door companies were asking him, like, how do you sleep at night, charging $10,000 for a brand new garage door?
Yep.
And then he responded with, how do you sleep at night? Like, your workers are driving like old vans, like they don't have any health insurance,
Yep.
like they're not getting paid enough. Like, you're not taking care of your workers. How do you sleep at night? And I was like, wow, like he explained that so well. And like I feel like a lot of companies, when they're building their brand, they don't look at the inner culture, like the team, and like not necessarily the outward facing stuff. And I thought that was super insightful.
You're building a brand whether you realize it or not, right? And because people are talking about you one way or the other, good or bad, and that is what your brand is. It's not your logo. It's not your wraps. Your brand is what your customers say about you and your team and the community at large, right? So I say that to say you should be doing other things, getting involved in your community, sponsoring sports, doing charity stuff, be seen in the community. But let's see, your brand is, when you get your culture right, your brand will pretty much take care of itself, because people can tell if you mean it or not, right? Your employees. And this is one of the things I see with private equity coming in a lot of these home service companies, is a lot of times they pay the entrepreneur, the leader, the CEO of the company, the owner, and they'll keep them on for a while, but they kind of neuter them, right? Like, there's no budget for doing breakfast every Friday, right? Or taking your entire team out, once a quarter to do those things. And so morale starts to come down. And when morale starts to come down, it bleeds over into the customer's home. And they start cutting corners because they want them to do an extra job a day and they want them to do it for less. And what happens is you start to see it show up in the reviews, right? It may take a while, but, if we get we'll probably get 1,000 reviews this year, and maybe 4 bad ones, right? Maybe 5 where the customer just couldn't be pleased or whatever. But when you start getting 1 out of 10 or something like that, 2 out of 10, 2 out of 15, you realize you got a problem. Something is going on somewhere, and that's where it kind of starts to show up, is in your reviews and how your customers are being treated and how they feel. So once you take that entrepreneurial spirit out and the culture that the entrepreneur has and make it about money and a transaction, that's exactly what it becomes. And if you're growing a company, if you're a business owner out there and you want to grow your company, do not worry about being the cheapest. Worry about taking care of your people. Do not be transactional. Be relational with both your people, your team, and your customers. Do whatever you can to add value to that. Your people will add value to the interaction with your customers, and you'll be able to grow a business where you've got some profit or you've got enough money to take care of these higher overhead things like insurance and keeping new trucks that aren't leaking oil on your customer's driveway, and keeping the right tools on the trucks and keeping inventory and things like that. And, it really is, like I said, culture and value are the two bedrocks, of growth. And if you're not going to be able to give a lot of extra value without the right culture, a culture of helpfulness, a culture of thoughtfulness, a culture of wanting to do the right thing, right? And if you don't have that, it literally becomes Walmart, Home Depot. And Home Depot, I guess, in general has a decent culture, but people want to go there and buy the things because they know it's, number one, it's convenient, but number two, it's probably the best price they're going to get, right? And there's no value adds there, right? Like they're not going to cut your lumber for you or, give you plans to build something or whatever. So we try and add as much value to an interaction as we can. Whether the people hire us or not, a lot of times we'll give them some value or tell them who to call that can help them if we can't, or how to do something if our price is too high. We'll tell them a little bit of something, or send them a YouTube video of something that might help them. And a lot of times those people will call us back and hire us because we were helpful. So just give value. Gary Vee talks about this, right? It was a jab, 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 left hook. Put out 6 pieces of content that gives value before you ever put out one that asks for something in return, right? So give value as much as you can and create a culture, and the rest of it will kind of build upon itself.
I've seen too many companies that have been in business for like 10, 15 years, and it looks like, based on the number of reviews they have in their Google business profile or Angie's, looks like they've been in business like it's their first year. What is your strategy for, I don't like to use the word extracting, but extracting reviews, making sure that every satisfied customer writes a review on your profile?
Ask. It's super simple. If you're leaving the house, if your techs or your guys are leaving a job without asking while they're face to face with the customer for a review, if you send a bird's eye text later or a chirp or something like that after the job is done and you didn't ask for the review while you were there, your chances of getting that review have diminished by probably 75%. Yeah. We have, I'm going to use this for an example, but this is a FedEx envelope, but we have a laminated sheet of paper that's got our logo on it and a QR code. And when the guys get done, they'll say, Mr. Troup, did we do a good job for you today? Did we miss anything? Is there anything that we need to do? Can you, whatever. And no, everything looks good. Can you pull your phone out for a sec? Sure. Will you take your phone and scan this QR code for me while I'm standing here? Sure, yeah, no problem. And of course, when the QR opens it up, the page, it's our GMB, right? And the stars, it just pops up and it's the 5 stars. If we did a good job for you today, would you mind leaving a review? And if you could, mention me by name, because we get credit for that. And, every week we get a bonus on the amount of reviews where we provided, good service, and it helps us to do bigger things with our families and all that. Would you mind doing that? Of course not. All right. And so I've got guys that are getting, 10, 15 reviews a week, and we got 10 guys. So it adds up pretty quick. So ask for the review while you're in front of the person or the customer. Number one, do a good job so you're not ashamed to not ask for the review, right? Or whatever. And then ask for the review. And then, there's other things. There's a lot of people that have tap cards and all things, but this is tried and true. The guys don't lose it. It's in their truck and their closeout kits and all the things, and they're laminated. And we've tried the little tap cards, but they all like these a lot better. So that's really the secret, is just asking.
Yeah.
You'll get some.
We give our clients lanyards, and those things work well too. I think like the most important thing is literally like right when the job is done, point of highest satisfaction, just ask in person and then stand there.
Anything better than nothing, but ask while you're in front of that customer. If you're not asking while you're in front of the customer and you start doing it, your reviews will 10x, right?
Yeah.
We hired my operations manager in April of 2023. Is that right? Yeah, April of 2023. We had 70-something reviews. And he's the one that brought this idea. That's what he came from 1-800 Got Junk, and he's like, this is what we do. and by July we had 250. Right, we had gone 6, 7 years on that GMB, and we had 70 something reviews, and then in 5 or 6 months we had 250. It was crazy. So now we've got probably close to 2,000 across all platforms, but it works.
Have you ever tried like double dipping? Like obviously the tech right after the job is done, they get the review with the QR code. And then like a couple hours later, the CSR calls and like does the same thing, check and see like, hey, how did the job do? And then it would mean a lot if you could leave a review on this other platform.
Yeah, so not really. I'm sure that there's a lot of value to the company in getting them to put a review on Facebook or Yelp or other places, but really the most important one is Google, right? And because that's where everybody goes to find everything. And if you're getting one on Facebook but not on Google, I mean, yeah, it'll be seen on Facebook, but most people don't search for home repairs on Facebook, right? It's a more of a billboard, right? Like for branding, in my opinion, on home service stuff anyway. Um, but Google is Yellow Pages, right? Google's where you go. It's like Amazon, right? And if I'm buying something on Amazon, I'm not going to buy the thing that's got 2 stars when there's a 5 star right below it. So that's why Google to me is king, and I'm sure there's some value in getting reviews on the other platforms. Now we do let our CSRs, if the guys didn't get a review when they were there, we do give the CSRs a spiff if they call and get a review, from the customer that the technicians didn't get. But in my opinion, they're all important, but none is nearly as close to being as important as Google.
Yeah, 100%. How do you make sure that your business isn't too reliant on Google? Because I feel like they kind of dominate like
Yeah,
every single aspect of paid ads, organic. Like, how are you?
it scares the shit out of me.
Yeah,
To be honest, Google is really the linchpin, and also the lynch mob, right? Like the mafia, because they can, you know, a level 5 guide can, do something on their side, in Google, and all of a sudden, you're violating their terms of service somehow, but they don't tell you what it is. They just turn off your GMB page, or they disapprove some ads that have been going for 9 months. Now suddenly it goes against their terms of service somehow. An ad that's been working. It is worrisome. It does bother me, and it does scare me, and that's why you have to build a brand, right? And if you're not actively brand building, it goes back to what I said earlier about planting seeds and watering them. It's like bamboo, right? Bamboo grows under the ground for whatever 8 or 10 years before it ever comes up, and then after it comes up, it just takes off. It's evergreen, and you have to be thoughtful about building your brand. Now, it's expensive and takes a while, but it's worth it. So you need to be doing that along the way. And if you do that, then people are going to start looking you up by name. And mass media is a great way to do that. But you have to have all the other things on the backside worked out, right? It doesn't do any good if you're all over TV and then you fumble all the jobs, right? If they call and you don't call them back, or you can't get them an estimate, or you do bad work and you're getting bad reviews and all the things, that's not the brand you want to build. But if you've got the fulfillment piece figured out, you know how to serve your customers well, you know how to do the things right, and you got a great culture and all the things, then it makes it a lot easier to build a brand that stands out, and people start looking you up by typing in your new door. So that's super important.
I've seen you building your personal brand, and I think you're doing a fantastic job, and I kind of look up to you in that regard. Have you seen any translation of your personal brand driving results for your business, or what kind of like I guess measurable results have you seen from building your personal brand on top of the company brand?
Yeah, so what it does is it's actually, so I'm building basically two personal brands simultaneously, right? Like, one is because I want to help business owners, right? Like, I spent a lot of time wandering around trying to figure out how to get started. Like I said, I've only really been doing this for 3 years, or maybe 3.5. to where I decided I wanted to grow my business and be a leader and all things. But I wandered around for a couple years, just trying to figure out where to start, looking for a best practice group to help me, or there's no playbook for what we're doing, right? So that's how we kind of got hitched our wagon to Tommy and his garage door stuff, and got in all these groups with Chris Yano is a good friend of mine. He owns a big marketing company, right? And he puts on an event every year called Rhino X, and I go there, and there's a lot of heat and air and plumbing companies there. I have nothing in common with these guys as far as the trade we do, but business is business, right? And principles are principles, and all these things. So those guys have helped me a lot. And so I wanted to build a personal brand where people would look to me for help in figuring out where to get started, how to sort through the noise online, right? Especially for people who are probably doing under 1.5 or 2 million a year, because you don't know who to listen to, and you don't know where to look for help, and they see Grant Cardone selling home service, help or whatever. It's not going to change. It's not going to change your life, right? It's not going to turn around your $2 million business if you're struggling. It's just not going to do it. It's not geared for that. But there are some things that will, and there are some resources that you may not know about that I can point you to. So that's one side of my personal brand. And the other side is I want to be known as the door expert in my community, right, and online. And I post in a lot of homeowner groups and things like that. Somebody's looking for a door or posts a picture or has a question about something. I just go in and try and give value. I don't even say anything about my company. I don't post a website, nothing. I just say, hey, I've got some experience in this area. These are a few things you may want to consider, may want to look for in hiring a contractor or getting this work done. These are some things you need to see. And that's it. And then they see my name, on Facebook. I'm Billy the Door Guy. And they're like, oh, maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. And then they go and click on my profile and they find my website, and then they reach out that way. So establishing myself as an expert in the field of our business, is kind of a big deal, because people, whether you're an expert or not, if you establish yourself as one and you tell people you are, people just believe it, right? And that's really half the battle. So two simultaneous paths that I'm trying to go down at the same time. It gets kind of confusing, between platforms sometimes, but I want to help business owners. I want to help, entrepreneurs, and I also want to help homeowners, obviously, for selfish reasons to grow my business. So those are the two things. So
I want to add to what you just said that, I'm sure it's the same in home service. There's a lot of people that ask questions about SEO, digital marketing, in these different Facebook groups. And every single comment is from an agency owner saying DM me, I have the solution for you, or here, go to this website, or do this or do that and pay me. And I've literally just gone in and just do research on their Google business profile and tell them what the issue is and solve their problem. And that's how I got half my clients.
Yeah, give value. And that builds trust too, right? This morning, in the Facebook group, it's called DFW Construction Needs or something, and it's literally like eBay. It's the cheapest homeowners and the cheapest contractors. They all get married and have babies, right? So this guy posted a picture of his door that his dog had been scratching at, and said, "I need to get a quote for replacing this door with a dog door." And there was 70 comments, and they were all just $1,200. I can do it tomorrow. $900. I can do it tomorrow. This and that. Not a single person asked this guy what he was trying to achieve or how big his dog was or anything. So I posted on there. I'm like, I see a lot of people spitting out prices, but no one is asking you, what you're trying to achieve. You need to consider these things when you do this project, and you'll have a lot better outcome. And I said, a lot of these guys are spitting out prices, and I can't really fault them for it, because there's a lot of people that need work right now. But if you want to get the best experience, consider price, but also consider these things, right? And that was it. And, I haven't checked on it in a while, but that's what I'm talking about. Give some value. Don't put yourself into that eBay trap of saying, I can do it for you tomorrow or whatever, right? It makes you look desperate, and it doesn't differentiate you from any of the other 70 people that commented on that post, right? So, and when I comment on something like that, and my name is Billy the Door Guy, do you think they're going to read what I posted? Right? Like, I didn't have an ask. I wasn't trying to get money from them. I was just giving them value. Sometimes you get something from it, sometimes you don't, but it builds your credibility, when you do stuff like that.
So for a smaller company who might be just like, scrapping, like just trying to get like money in the door, like they're just trying to make things work. What do you think is the best avenue to do that if they're not really established and they don't have the budget for Google ads, things like that?
Well, it's really tricky. I've been that guy, right? And it's still recent enough to where I have a great recollection of it. And it's hard, right? Like if I knew what I know today, it would be hard. And 15 years ago, it'd be hard to convince me to start a business, doing that because it's a lot harder to get attention now, right? Like our attention is so diluted with all the things that we have going on with social media and the news and things are just different than they were when I started 15 years ago and online attention so it's tough, but the first thing is if you're a small company and you're trying to kind of just get your foot in the door, start out from day one with your culture, right? Like be the guy you want to work for, be the guy that someone else would want to work for, and do it to add value. The more value you can add, do something extra for your clients, the more, they'll refer you. Referrals are going to be big. Ask for referrals. Knock on doors, right? Like you can build a relatively decent sized company relatively quick by knocking on doors. And then Facebook groups is really, I think, an under-leveraged opportunity. Just joining, like local moms groups or neighborhood groups in your geographic area that you want to work in, or get your wife to get into those groups, or girlfriend or sister or mom or somebody, and just say, hey, these guys did a great job for me, blah, blah, blah. But if you're in there, give value, right? Like, don't use, when you get ready to do this, don't hire someone that's going to buy the cheap paint from Home Depot. Make sure you specify this kind of paint for this wall because it will give you the best end result. And leave it at that, right? And then, lo and behold, those people will DM you and reach out to you. So start doing that, but also know how to read your P&L, right? Like I chased money for a long time, not knowing any different. I thought that the way I found out if I made money was I took all my receipts to my accountant at the end of the year and my bank statements, and they would tell me if I owed taxes or not. That is insane. Like looking back, I'm like, gosh, how did I ever live through this?
I just got past that, by the way.
Bro, it's a stepping stone. But what I realized, and I learned this listening to Tommy, is I can decide how much I want to do next year, right? And build a budget. And this is what we're going to shoot at. This is how we're going to do it. This is how many people we need. This is how many leads we need at this close rate, at this cost per lead, at this cost per job, customer acquisition, right? At this gross profit, and this is what we're going to be left with. And if you start that in January and you do you close out your month, by February 10th, and you look at January and you're like, crap, I'm behind. I've got too many people. I got to let somebody go, or I've got to do this, or I got to close more jobs, right? But it's a roadmap, and it gives you the ability to do that. And you need to leave marketing in there, right? So if you did $100,000 in January and you're okay spending 10%, then you need to have $10,000 to spend in February, right? And then if you do 150 in February, then maybe you can spend 15,000 in March, right? But having a budget for that and saving some money for marketing instead of the hardest thing, and a couple things. The hardest thing is when you're small is just surviving on your cash flow. Building a business on cash flow alone, super hard. I did it. I didn't have any extra money. And we finally got some investors at a certain point that bought small portions of the company, super small, but it helped. But just building a company on cash flow is slow and it takes a long time. But you have to spend the things on. One of the things I learned about 3 years ago or 4 years ago was the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah, that's
20% of
powerful.
the 20% of of your customers bring you 80% of your income. 20% of the things you do will have 80% impact. So figure out what's going to have the biggest impact and spend some money on that, right? And keep doing that over and over. We built frameworks, and we built like 5 frameworks around the business. And every time we go around the business, we'd spend a little bit of money on each one, right? To keep things in balance, because it wouldn't do me any good if I generated more leads than we could service and sales, right? It didn't do me any good to outsell my capacity, for my installers, right? Because if we're 4 weeks out, you're going to lose jobs there, right? So it's a balance, and it's super hard to do on cash flow, but it is possible. Know your numbers, know how much it costs to run your operation, right? And know your gross profit. Your gross profit is the most important number. If you don't know how much it costs you per hour to run your business or a particular job, you're going to have creep on, if you're doing a remodeling or handyman or painting or whatever, you get budget creep or whatever, and before you know it, your gross profit is 30%. Well, it costs 32% to run your company. So you just went in the hole on this job 2%. You're better off staying home and watching Oprah than going to work and losing money, right? At least you're not losing money watching Oprah, right? So get your gross profit you need to get to cover your overhead and have a profit, and to have a reason to get up and go to work, right? To have something to work toward. That's number one. There's a book that I read that helped me a lot. I've kind of outgrown it, but not really, called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. If It's a super good book for young, up-and-coming entrepreneurs and business owners to kind of help them to handle their money a little bit better and to pay themselves first, right? It's kind of based off of the principle in The Richest Man in Babylon, right? Pay yourself first. Pay yourself a tithe or whatever. So know your numbers, know your gross profit, and run as lean as you can, right? Like most types of companies that I've seen can force their way to $1 million, 1.5 with 4 people, right? 3, 4, 5 people, something like that. Try and do, 150 to 250,000 per person in your company. I think we're running at like 220 or something like right now in my company. So, there's companies that do way better. Software, you got a whole lot fewer people to sell software and keeps generating income over this. But service is a lot harder. You need more people to generate that money. So know your numbers. Work off the Pareto principle. Spend your money and do the things that are going to have the biggest impact, right? And then, just keep knocking on doors and looking for guerrilla marketing tactics to kind of help, and then start tiptoeing and figuring out messaging that works. Get with somebody smart with Facebook ads or PPC, and start testing messaging, things like that, to where when you do, it is do or die, then you can do the most efficient thing.
I think there's like ridiculous amounts of PE money in the home service space right now. I don't want to call it ridiculous, because I think these companies are extremely valuable and pretty difficult to build. What do you think is the biggest mistake business owners make? 'Cause I feel like a lot of them are like, yeah, I'm going to build this business and I'm going to sell it, but they like all their stuff's like whack. Like they have the key man issue. Things aren't being tracked properly. Their marketing isn't in place. Like I feel like they're kind of in for a rude awakening if they ever try to step into that realm. What's your recommendation to those people?
Build your business to sell, whether you're going to sell it or not, right? And key man issues become a thing. I realized that if I was going to have a company that could run without me, I had to, go through all that too. Your numbers have to be on point, right? Like if you're not profitable, someone may buy you for your book of business or whatever, but you're not going to get that much money for it. But you need to be profitable. You need to know your numbers. You need to be running a well-oiled machine. Those companies get the highest multiples, right? And what I did was I started hiring for one thing at a time, right? Like I at one time did everything in my business, and there's really 5 important things in my business that need oversight from an A player. And the first one was I hired someone that could help get me out of the field, right? I kind of promoted the guy into that position, and that was my son Brian. He's been with me for years, but he knows all the installs and all the field stuff front to back. So he was my eyes and ears in the field. That got me out of the truck, right? I was still 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but it allowed me to focus on things that generated revenue. The second one was hiring a production manager. We make all of our own doors and stuff in our facility. So hiring someone to do that where I didn't have to manage that or to be a part in the shop was that. The third key hire was my operations manager, Dan. And we kind of have a line in the sand in our business, and it's kind of like AD and BC, right? We have before Dan and after Dan, right? So I drew a line in the sand. Dan came in, and after Dan took everything off of my plate that didn't generate revenue, right? Leases and setting up utilities and working on payroll and doing interviews and insurance and workers' comp and all that. If it didn't generate money, he takes it. And I can't tell you that allowed me to focus on nothing but things that generated revenue: sales, marketing, fulfillment, stuff like that, training. And then once I got Dan in place, then we got Grace. Grace kind of handles our dispatch and scheduling and just kind of intermediary between the field and the office, right? Like she talks to customers and kind of prepares them on what's next and things like that, and manages that aspect. But having those key people in place, and in accounting, I have an accounting person too, which is life-changing, right? Like knowing your numbers and knowing where you're at all times will allow you to pivot much faster, because if you had a bad month in January, but you don't know about it until March, right, that your cash flow's, all messed up, doesn't do you much good. So having someone in those key areas to watch over those things to where I still manage sales oversight and marketing oversight, right? Like just general oversight. I don't do the things, like the SEO and all things, but I come up with ideas and we help implement and work with Jonathan and his team to do that. And it allows me to do that. And then I'm kind of the sales manager. So that's what I like to do. That's what I'm the best at, and it allows me to stay in that lane. I don't really meddle in the field stuff. I don't go out in the shop and meddle. I go out there and talk to everybody. Hey, how you doing? What can I do for you? Is there anything that I can help do that will make your day better, or is there tools that you guys need that you don't have? And I do that with all the whole company, and then I manage sales and marketing. So being able to pass those things off to where I'm not the key man in the business, and I can be gone for a month and come home and everything's just fine. Some of our biggest days, weeks, and months happened when I was out of the picture. And just really pulling myself out of the day-to-day is something that I would recommend. But you need to know your numbers. You need to have a budget, right? And like setting the number that we want to shoot for this year and knowing how many leads we have to have. And already today's the 4th day of January. We really only had 2 business days this month, but we hit our number that we needed for leads and our close rate and our average ticket, right? Like we're tracking. You should know that every day, how many leads you need every day to get there. And then, after 15 days, you're like, shoot, I'm 6 leads behind. They'll come up somewhere, right? But you can't do anything big unless you know where you're at, on a day to day. And then getting good people that you can trust with those numbers and manage the KPIs and know that they're good people and get out of their way. That will make your company worth a lot more when it comes time for an investor or to sell your business. I see people a lot. I'm in this group called Blue Collar Millionaire. And there's a lot of people that are just looking for businesses to buy or businesses to invest in, and those are fine. The problem is they don't have the entrepreneur spirit, right? Like if you go and buy an auto body shop and the owner retires, a baby boomer retires, and you go in, it's really transactional at that point, right? Unless you love working on cars and you're going to be in there working with those guys, rubbing elbows with them, it's going to have a hard time earning their respect, right? Um, so if you want to be a Subway franchise opener and you love making sub sandwiches and you go in every day and you light that place up, you're probably going to be pretty good. You're probably going to set some records. But if you're just buying a franchise to have a franchise and paying your people and counting the pennies, you're not going to break any records, right? You're going to sell some stuff, but you're not going to break any records. So being present and being a part of what's going on and being a part of the culture, is a really big deal. But they don't lend a lot of value or weight when they're valuing your business to the culture, and it's kind of sad to see.
I think the trades and like home services kind of has this culture of like a lot of people are stuck in like I have to work hard, like I have to be on the job sites, and they don't really get to step on the other side of like being the architect of a business and like calling the shots but not being on the job sites. Can you explain the difference between you when you were like, manufacturing the doors and you were like part of all the processes, you were going into customers' homes, and where you're at now, where you can kind of like have a bird's eye view of your business and I don't know, it's almost like a board game at this point for you, I feel like.
Yeah, it kind of is, right? Like being able to pull yourself out of the game and to get above it and to look it over is very valuable. When you're in the thick of it, it's hard to see, to have an omniscient point of view or to be up on the mountain looking at all the things. What you can't see are the constraints, right? And growing your business is just the process of over and over removing constraints, right? And making things easier. And a lot of times when you're in the day to day, you can't see the constraints until it's too late or something falls apart. So being able to step out and look, and I'm already looking for, we don't have a constraint per se on certain things right now, but I can see what our next constraint is. And I spend a lot of time looking for the things that I need to avoid that altogether, right? And then when I solve that one, then I kind of already have an idea on what the next one's going to be. So it allows me to focus on removing constraints and kind of getting above it and seeing what's going on. It's super hard when you've got to have this next job to make payroll. Been there 100 times. They say you're not a real entrepreneur until you've written a personal check to make payroll, and I've done it. And I think everybody that's got any measure of success has. And you have to be able to do that, right? You have to be able to do the hard things, but you also have to be able to pull yourself out of the day-to-day and to effectively lead. You can't be a leader, very well if you're also doing all the things with all the people. So leadership and a little bit of vision. You have to share your vision too, right? Like it doesn't do any good for any of this stuff if your only vision is your balance sheet, right? That's one of the things a lot of businesses or these people that buy these businesses to invest in them miss is their vision is just to make a profit, right? It's not to grow a company that also grows leaders to where one of my missions is to grow leaders within my business to where whatever happens with my business down the road, they will have a higher marketable value on the marketplace anywhere else than they would if they didn't have the things that I'm putting in them, right? So they'll be leaders somewhere else because the things that we're teaching, they're not getting anywhere. And if it was a lateral move, they're going to go somewhere and probably know more than the CEO, right? People are like, well, why do you train them to do these things? They could just go start their own company. What do you do if they leave? And I'm like, well, I've heard guys say this all the time. What happens if I don't train them and teach them how to be leaders and they stay, right? So you need leaders. You need to, share your vision and, just keep building people. One of the things that I realized and why we started doing the Leadership Book Club is one of the constraints to scale is leadership. And there's two ways I think that I've found that you can get leaders. One is you can build leaders from within your organization and build them up as you go. Or two is you can hire from the outside and bring them in. Both are fine, but if you build them as you go and as you grow and you can insert them in the leadership positions, they already have the buy-in from the rest of the company and they're already a part of the culture. and they're happy to get a raise and to do more things. But if you hire someone from outside and bring them in, it's a different paradigm, right? Like they have to get buy-in and respect for the people that are already there. Sometimes someone that's there may be upset because they didn't get a chance at the position or whatever, right? And then the people that you bring in have to learn your culture and learn how to become a part of that and all the things, right? So I'm a firm believer in, especially for the component of what we do of building leaders from within. Now, there may come a point where we grow this company to a certain point that I need to hire leadership from outside the company for C-suite, things like that, business type stuff that I'm personally not, smart enough to do. And that point in time will come, but that's a little bit different than, hiring, or having leadership to run the things that are customer facing.
How do you identify A players?
They really kind of identify themselves. You can tell they get annoyed working with people who are slow or just there punching a time clock. They'll start to complain about guys that are dragging things out or milking things out. You'll see them pick trash up out of the parking lot. They start to ask questions. They're more curious about the big picture, right? Like. They do things on their own time to make things easier for everyone else. They don't like to miss days because they don't like to get behind, or if they know someone else is dependent on them, they'll come in sick. Right? You got a guy that's calling out 2 or 3 days a month. He's probably not an A player. He may be a B player. Good at his job and relatively plugged in, but he's not somebody you want to elevate. As long as he continues to do that. So you can just tell, you can smell the energy, right? Like you can feel the energy. And, they say, 1 A player is worth 2 B players, and 3 or 4 C players. So you can pay them a little bit more, they'll do more. And, I've got way more A players in a 30+ person company than a lot of 100-person companies do. It's really a blessing. And they're hard to get. You got to kiss a lot of frogs, and sometimes you don't really realize they're A players until they're taking stuff off your plate or they take a lot of initiative, right? Like they see constraints within their field of view, and they start to remove those constraints without asking, or they have ideas. They got a little bit of vision. So, and they're not just, you don't have to go find them to give them something to do. That's a big one.
How long do you think? First things first, can a B player turn into an A player? And like, how long do you give people to kind of like sink into the job and then kind of show themselves, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, it's hard, right? It is possible. I was probably a C player for a long time, right? But it has to come from within, right? They have to be inspired. They have to decide that they're tired of waiting on the world to bring them what they want downstream, right? I used to think that, and there's nothing wrong with this if you're one of these people that, like where I was raised, right, in rural Arkansas, you worked at the sawmill, you drove 45 minutes to what we call town, to Fayetteville, and you got a job in a factory, or you worked construction or did whatever. You made just enough money to pay your bills, buy Christmas presents, maybe buy a house or whatever. And you did that for 30 years, right? And you just took life as it come to you. Tons of people like that in the world. But the problem, it's not really the problem. The thing is, they don't ever really know, or they don't get curious, or they can't take the chance or take the risk on doing bigger things, right? And what I learned was I had a mindset like that, and then I realized that was my impediment. That was what was holding me back. And that's when I decided to change. But what I realized is you can swim upstream and take all the world will give you all you want, but you got to go upstream to get it. If you sit in one spot and wait for it to come by, you're just going to have to take what it brings you, and that's going to be what it brings everyone else. Just enough to get by, maybe a lucky day here and there, a bad day here and there. But if you're willing to take the chance and you're willing to put in the extra effort, and it doesn't take that much extra effort to go upstream, you'll do 100 times more than what you'll do just sitting there with 5% more effort. It's really, really, you know, interesting to me how little you have to do extra to get that big payback.
Yeah. I feel like some people in this world, maybe a lot of people, I mean, my generation probably, um, they almost work harder to not work than work to work, if that makes any
I've
sense.
always seen it, right? Like these scammers work really hard at these scams, right? Like, and we always say if they put half the amount of work into doing something, really productive and good that they do into this scam, they could really be rich, right? And that's it's true. One of the things that I realized early on was if I'm going to scale my business, I have to do it with young people, right? And one of the old mindsets is that young people don't want to work anymore. They're lazy. People don't want to work. This and that. And there's probably something to that. But here's the thing: you're not going to scale a company without young people, right? So they work for different reasons than my generation worked or my parents' generation. Because here's you didn't ask for this, but I'm gonna give it to you anyway. The generation before mine, like my parents' generation, they were raised by people who went through the Great Depression, right? So, and I'm going to tie this to mindset too. I was raised by someone who was raised by someone who went through the Depression. People that went through the Depression coming out into the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they were always, it was a scarcity mindset, right? Like, because things were scarce. They lived it and they were always waiting on the shoe to drop, right? Like, the market to crash again, for the world to crash, right? And it never did, per se. We've had some bad economic times through there, but it never as bad as it was during the Depression. But they always felt like that was going to happen. So what happened was they raised their children, which is my parents' generation, with a scarcity mindset. So my parents have a scarcity mindset to this day. I was raised by them, and so I, by default, I had a scarcity mindset myself. And when I realized that, and that all I had to do was release that to break free, I didn't realize that I was breaking free when I decided to release it. Bro, it's like a whole different world. And a lot. How old are you?
24.
So if you grew up with your parents, every generation wants their children to have it better than they had growing up, right? And it's really kind of a culture in America. We all want our kids to have better than we had, and we get them everything they want for Christmas, for their birthdays. I've got an 18-year-old who doesn't want anything. He's the hardest person to buy for things for Christmas or birthdays were because he has everything he wants. It's super hard to motivate someone who has everything they want, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of young people are unmotivated because they've always had everything they want. They've always had a safety net. Their parents have always kind of sheltered them. And generationally, it's continued to happen. Well, now we've got a generation of young people who have never had a bad day, right? They didn't have to go out and figure out how to make their car payment before it got repossessed or to feed their kids. They were sheltered from those hard times, a lot of them. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So it's harder for them. They're not as motivated by money as our parents were, right? So you got to find what motivates them. You got to inspire them. You got to find their dreams and help them to achieve the things that they want to achieve. Now, of course, we all need money to survive, but weirdly, a lot of young people, it's like 3, 4, 5 down on their list of things that are important to them when they're, taking on a new job. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be, they want some notoriety or whatever, right? They want to be elevated or whatever it is. But young people will still work. You're not going to scale a company today without working with young people. And the people that think that young people don't want to work, they've got a broken mindset, a scarcity mindset, and they're never going to grow their company anyway.
Yeah.
It's one of my pet peeves when I hear, my peers and people older say that. I'm like, okay, buddy.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to it. But at the same time, like you were saying, there's definitely different motivations in the younger generations.
For sure.
So yeah, I agree with that.
You're a good example of someone who's wants more, right? Like you want something. You've started your own marketing company. You've started a podcast, right? And getting over the fear of what other people think is really a big limiting factor. For a long time, I was afraid to put myself out there and start doing content and stuff because I was worried what people would think. But when you learn how to release that belief or that mindset, the people that you're worried about what you think, they wouldn't come to you help you anyway, right? Like they don't care. They've got their own problems. They're glad you have yours. So when you can release that from your mindset, that the worry of what someone's going to think if you do or say, when you let go of that, the world is your oyster, right? I don't care.
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit of getting over that in the beginning to start making content, putting out videos, changing your name to Billy the Door Guy, things like that. People ask, I'm like, I'm the door guy. I'm the man. Come to me if you want to know, right? And then you start putting that out into the universe, and people are like, okay, he is the expert, and it's amazing. I've seen this happen in home service several times. These guys start putting out content on business and things, even though they've got a shitty business and they're not doing very good, but suddenly they become. It doesn't take. You don't have to do that for very long for people to see you as an actual authority on subjects. So it's good and it's bad. It's bad if you don't really have anything good or new to say. It's good if you do and you're putting out good stuff. Like Tommy, his podcast he's always giving a lot of value and doing things, and he doesn't sell his attention. There's other guys that you got to pay to be on their podcast, and they're using their authority, which I can't necessarily say is bad, but there's a couple of them I don't agree with. They use their authority in the space now just as a sales funnel,
Yeah.
They put on these events as a sales funnel, and I'm kind of torn on all that. So, but it's probably because I don't have anything to sell and I just want to help people.
Yeah.
So
one of the things that I think I've struggled with is, and it's crazy because I got into digital marketing, so it shouldn't be an issue, is I like living a private life. I don't really like posting content. I never really wanted to. And I didn't think I really had anything to say. And it's probably because I didn't. I was still learning how marketing works. I was still learning how to set up a Google business profile, optimize Google Ads campaign. I didn't know how to speak with full confidence on these subjects because I didn't know them fully. And I feel like a lot of especially the people my age, they want to be the influencer first and then learn how to do the actual task. Whereas I kind of for the last few years, I just kept my head down and tried to kept my mouth shut, learned as much as I could. And now I'm at a point where I'm starting to gain that confidence and I know what works and I know the things that I can speak on competently. And I feel like that was a huge shift where I'm oh, I actually can talk and provide value to people and help other home service businesses. And now I'm starting to fall into that. But before I literally hated social media. I didn't really want anything to do with it.
It's another one of those double-edged sword things, I mean, it can be used for good or evil, right? Evil meaning it's a time suck. It's time you'll never get back, right? But you can also provide value to people who spend a lot of time on it. And I put stuff out for a long time, just kind of dabbling and getting over my fear of posting stuff, worried about what people would think. But then when I got that first message from someone that says, man, thank you for posting that. You really touched me, or it really helped me get through this, or, they'll reach out for advice or whatever, because I'm putting out real things that have happened to me or real things that have inspired me or whatever. And when you get feedback from people, you know that you only need to make a difference for one person for it to have an impact on you. And I had I guess sometime last year, a guy I went to high school with that I actually had started a business with him and his brother when I was 18 or 19 something. We were doing roofing, and I hadn't heard from him in 25 years, 20 years. And he reached out to me. We were friends on Facebook. He reached out to me, and we talked for an hour and a half. He's like, man, how did you blow up so fast? How did you get this turned around so quick? And I'm like, it just looks like it was quick because of social media. But I said, these are things I did. But he said, but he told me a lot of the things that I was putting out were helping him. I didn't know, really. I hadn't gotten a lot of feedback up to that point. I've since gotten tons of feedback, but, you just never know who you're helping by putting out something with the intention of being helpful or giving value, right? And if you do it with those two motives in mind, to give value and to be helpful, I promise you're touching and helping someone. So that's
I
important.
posted an excerpt from Think and Grow Rich, and I saw you did it, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna do the same thing. Uh, it was like a poem about just like believing that you can, and then
Yeah.
normally like once you believe, you win. And someone reached out to me, and they were like, I found a ton of value in this post, and they literally like we had like a 30-minute phone call, and I was like, wow, I didn't even. It's crazy how that works.
It's interesting. I think about it a lot, the butterfly effect, right? And I've got, a lot of big things happening in my life that I can trace back to one chance encounter, with someone in home service or whatever, right? Like, it's crazy. And, we can be that for others too, even though we don't think, we may not have an opinion or think that we're worthy or have all the tools yet or know all the right things to say or have the experience, but some people are in negative land, right? Like, they haven't got started. They're still trying to figure out how to get it in gear. And there's people out there even with limited experience that we may have now that we can help. And we should be trying to do that. My business, I think about it like going to the gym a lot, right? Like, when you're at the gym, you look to the left and there's this guy that looks like he's been in the gym every day for 20 years. Like, man, how did I get that? And then you look to your right, and there's someone that looks like they haven't, consumed less than 5,000 calories a day for 20 years, right? And you're in the middle. And there's always going to be that. There's always going to be someone bigger and better than you, and there's always going to be someone trying to figure out how to get started. And it's our job to learn and to emulate the people that are bigger and better and doing better things if they're inclined to help. And it's our job to pass it along to the people who we look like that guy to them, right? Because we're in between them, because we have the skills and the tools already needed to help pull them to where we are. But as we're pulling them, we're also moving ourselves. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy as you bring somebody along as you're being dragged along by someone else, right? So it's just a big circle. And, we have, I feel if we have some level of success or understanding or something that can help someone, we should be sharing that.
Heck yeah. All right. Are you getting tired of me yet?
No, not at all. I could go for days.
Perfect. I kind of want to pivot back to marketing and go over a few other things. Starting with Valpak, 'cause I know you're currently using Valpak, correct?
Well, we are working on some messaging, and we're kind of in deep with them, and whatnot. But yeah.
Like, how long have you been doing any type of direct mail, whether it's Valpak or through another provider?
Since last year, we started flirting with it. We started out sending out kind of, what do they call it, EDDM, every door direct mail, right? Like, and targeting areas and neighborhoods and specific houses we wanted to get to. Because about 20 years ago, I got a postcard in the mail about a house around the corner from mine that had just sold. And it had a picture of that house and that address on the postcard, but it was addressed to me. And I thought that was very interesting. I would love to be able to do something, but back then it was super hard to do. Now it's a lot easier. So what we would do is we would take a picture of the before and after on the house on the street that we just did, and we would send it around to people. So number one, it would be their neighborhood. Number two, it would be a street or an address that they recognize and a house they would recognize and show a visual impact. And so we've had some success with that and building messaging around that, but we haven't really spent a lot of money and really just pushing it out yet. Just really kind of having some messaging sitting on the sidelines for when we get ready to.
What do you think are the biggest mistakes home service businesses make when it comes to direct mail?
I'm probably the wrong guy to ask too deep on that, but probably just shotgunning your stuff and sending it to not knowing your avatar is probably one, right? Like you really want to double down on your customer. That was the cool thing about Valpak. They took 3 or 4 years worth of data out of Service Titan and chopped it all up. So we know, our avatar by age, by income, by credit, and pockets, right? Like the top 6 zip codes that make up, 80% of our sales over the last few years. So those are really the ones we need to focus on, right? So you get that data and can focus on the right ones. But a lot of guys will probably just hire a company, put some stuff on postcards or mailers, and send them all over the metroplex, right, to areas that would never hire you, can't afford you, don't understand, and then the wrong message is probably another.
Jonathan Bannister, in talking with him, one of the things that he said, which I've now seen, because I save all the direct mail that I get so I can kind of like have a little swipe file of it, is picking out the zip codes that you want and then just like slamming them, like repeating it every single month, every single week, whatever, like repeating the same piece of mail with like, a few little differences to those same addresses. And like,
Yeah.
I've seen that work.
Yeah, just continually touching them. We had a couple calls last week where people were like, "Yeah, we got your thing 3 or 4 times," and finally decided to call. But direct mail is pretty important to branding, also, right? So if they're running, you can geofencing. Jonathan, we do some geofencing on Facebook and whatnot. So if you can target street level stuff now, in neighborhoods. So if they see your ad on Facebook and then they get your thing in the mail and then they hear you on the radio. Well, when they do want a new door or whatever, then they go, "Oh, I'm going to call this guy," or they pull the thing out. Another thing that I learned from going to these events and learning from people is R&D. And the first time I ever heard anybody say that was Tommy Mello, and it stands for rob and duplicate, right? So I like to look at what others are doing, right? And big companies in the area that are, doing things like Milestone Electric, they're a big and heat and air around here. I look at their direct mail stuff and Tommy's stuff, right? Like, super clean, and we get the Valpaks, and I like to go through and some of them, look like this. This is my hunting license, but it comes in like it's just too much data, right? Too much information, right? And it's just all over the place. And those are the ones that you throw in the trash. But having looking at Tommy's Valpaks mailers and stuff, and the messaging and just the layout and stuff, but like I said earlier, success leaves clues. So you can kind of look at some things that companies that are killing it and it's working, and emulate them. Do some of the things that they're doing. Talk to people who are already doing it and doing good things with it, and you'll start to see some success. Another thing is to do things like this before you need it, right? Start planting these seeds, like setting up the new GMBs and building your culture and SEO, right? Like before we're going to new markets, we're going to start doing SEO there, months and months beforehand, because it takes a while for that stuff to take hold, and branding, so start doing things before you need them. And I would hate to spend a lot of money on PPC or direct mail because I was in a slump, and I needed to bust a slump, or I needed, to sell some things to grow the company or to save the company, because you're probably not going to.
What do you think is the best medium in terms of bang for your buck? Paid ads, Valpak?
Yeah. I'm in a unique position, man. Radio, honestly, but
Really?
yeah, you really have to have everything else dialed in. You got to have your operations have to be slick, and you have to be already building a brand. You have to have a remarkable brand and a remarkable service, and a remarkable culture, because unless you want to be one of those transactional companies that are just selling the cheapest thing for the cheapest price, and you've got to move a bunch of it, that's transactional. But Roy, taught me that there's really it's expensive to reach, a lot of people, but you get to reach a lot of the right people, right? And it's really inexpensive on a per person level, right? It's like just like a fraction of a penny to reach a person 7 times a week, right? When you're in the right market with the right message. the problem is those fractions of pennies add up, and you get one out of 10,000 to call you. So, but as long as it works out with your ratio, and you add that into your customer acquisition costs, then you're going to be okay. So if you're spending 400,000 a year on radio, but you're doing 8 million in sales, that's pretty good. That's only 5% of your revenue that you're spending on radio. By the time you add in all the other things that you have to for your marketing, your digital and all things, and you get to 8, 9, 10 points, you're doing just fine.
In what order do you think companies should do their marketing, if that makes any sense? Like what platform kind of rolls into the next one?
Well, they need to have a landing page at minimum, right? And I think I may be wrong. I don't think you have to have a website or a landing page to do a GMB. But you should have a landing page or a website, right, that tells people who you are, what you do, and where you work, real quick. One page is fine, right? Like something just to get started. You got to have landing pages for ads, right? And then, all having a landing page and then setting up your GMB and having those backlinks and interlinks and all that is a big thing. So you need a landing page or a website and a GMB. Those really are all free. You can get a $25 a month subscription to Wix and build your first website. I didn't build my first website. I probably built my third or fourth one. And the website that I built that year, that was the first year we ever did $1 million in a year, right? So I built a website that we sold $1 million with. It was ugly, but it worked, right? So
it's $1 million website.
Yeah, you can do it. And Wix has got a lot of built-in tools to help with some stuff on SEO and backlinks and things like that. But you need to start becoming. The best thing that did was to teach me how all that works, right? And why it works and whatever. But GMB is super important if you want people to take you serious. You got to get reviews, really. And then, a landing page. And then probably the next easiest is Meta or PPC, but it's super hard to compete in plumbing and heat and air if you've got one of those kind of companies, on PPC.
HVAC is the worst from what we've seen.
Yeah,
it's so competitive.
In the summer, So that's why you got to build a brand, and it's super hard. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of money. And that's why I would probably be discouraged if I was in one of those places and starting over. A lot of guys just don't know any better, and I didn't know any better. It's probably why I made it through the gauntlet, because I was too dumb to quit. But they don't understand customer acquisition costs and gross profit. They price their service based off of what everybody else is charging, and they're stuck in the truck. Now, if you got a 2 or 3 person company and you're making 100,000, 150, 200, you're probably going to be fine if that's what you want to do. But if you want to grow a company, you have to understand customer acquisition costs and marketing and gross profit, or you're not going to make it. So, the path of least resistance and, is probably, getting a lot of reviews to your GMB is going to be the cheapest, easiest, fastest. The GMB's free, so, and you can do a free landing page or a website, and then you got to start worrying about, your customer retention and on page and, the flow, the site, and, how do you get, if you're getting 1,000 people to your website a day, but only, one of them or 2 or 3 are clicking, you got a problem there, so there's a lot of things that go into that, but I would say a landing page and a GMB is a good start.
Where do you see your new door 1 year, 5 year, 10 years from now?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's always further along than what I see after those times, right? Like we just had our Christmas party a few weeks ago, and I was standing in the warehouse before we all got started, and we had it there on site. And almost a year to the day, we had moved into that place. You can go back to my profile and see videos from when we moved in, and I'm walking around just talking. This place was 15,000 square feet, and we moved there from 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. And I'm like, we'll be able to retire here, right? And now when you go in there today, it's like, we got about 5 more months here, and we're going to outgrow this thing, right? So they say that people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 5 or 10, right? So my vision for Your New Door is to be $30 million a year by the end of 2027, or at least pay on that pace, right? And that's 3 years from now, 2025, 2026, and 2027. And at that point, I hope to have a liquidity event of some sort. I don't think I'll ever give up control, but we'll do something. So that's kind of my vision and what I see. There's a whole lot of moving parts between here and there, but I have no doubt that in 365 days from now, when I look back, we're probably going to have done a lot more than I expected. One of the big things is we're setting our growth, overall top line growth, lower than what we did last year over year, but we are putting insane pressure on ourselves for EBITDA, right? Like, we want to grow our EBITDA, and if I can get my business to I don't care to grow less on top line, but multiply my EBITDA. There's not going to be another home service company that is doing the numbers that we're doing in top line with the EBITDA that we're having, and it's going to make my company worth a whole lot more. So that's what we're focused on this year is, cleaning up our systems and processes, cleaning up our books, and focusing on EBITDA growth instead of top line.
Heck yeah. I just want to say I see you as another Tommy Mello in the making. Obviously, you two are unique, but I think you're on the trajectory to kind of have the same amount of influence he has over the home service space. I'm really happy that you took the time here. I know your time's valuable. We're at 2 hours right now. I seriously appreciate you coming on. I didn't even have to look at any of my notes. You're really good at this. This was a great conversation.
I appreciate the opportunity. And, when you do something you love, right, it doesn't feel like work. And I touched on it earlier, a lot of people are buying businesses for investment opportunities, and that's fine, but they're not going to do nearly as good as people who love what they do, right? Like, you can tell Tommy loves growing his business. He loves helping other business owners, right? And I'm the same way. I love helping people. I may be a little grouch or an a-hole sometimes or whatever, but I still have a heart for helping people. I have a heart for growing people. I have a lust for winning, and I get the same dopamine hits when we do things to grow our business that I did when I was winning fishing tournaments, So it's replaced that for me, and I love it. I love going in every day. I love building people. Turning them into leaders, putting things on them, and then watching them, struggle and then thrive and then grow. So I'm happy to be that for anybody that's trying to figure out how to get going. There probably will be a point where I don't have the bandwidth or the attention to help very many more people like I do now. But until that time comes, if anybody is curious or needs some help or guidance or some light mentorship, I'm happy to do that.
Where can people find more about you, more about your company? Where do you want to send people to?
Yeah, so Facebook is really the best place for now. We're building out I'm building out Billy the Door Guy on TikTok, so we're getting ready to get that going, and YouTube, and then we're going to use Instagram more for business, for the door business stuff. A lot more people are doing that there. But right now, Facebook is the best place. Just look me up, Billy the Door Guy. Cline. My business is obviously yournewdoor.com. I'm always posting stuff on there. On my personal page, a lot of things are business related and less door related or my company related. I share a lot of my business Your New Door page stuff on my personal page or my personal brand page. but people reach out all the time that way. Send me a DM, send me a friend request, follow me there, and I'm always trying to give value and help, and that's really what I enjoy doing.
Awesome. This has been a great episode. Thank you so much for taking the time. I seriously appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on, Will. It's been fun.